Tonight on Metro News. The whitebait season is kicking off. Primary healthcare nurses are still fighting for a pay rise. And we go behind the scenes at What Now to see how they cope with COVID.
Kia ora and welcome to Metro News, brought to you by Te Whakapāho o Aotearoa.
Nurses are planning to stop work again next week as they fight for a pay rise. Staff in medical centres and general practices want parity with their DHB colleagues. Hugo Cameron has the latest and joins us now. Hugo.
Well, the New Zealand Nurses Organisation says there's a 10% pay gap between these staff and those in DHBs. You might remember the pay parity strike 2 weeks ago. Over 3,000 primary healthcare workers were involved in that. They'll also be a part of the Stop Work meeting at the end of the month. Now, this will affect about 500 medical centres and GPs across the country on the morning of September 30th. These nurses will take 2 hours off to discuss planned negotiations with employers and their next steps if no progress is made there.
Thanks, Hugo. Whitebait fritters are on the menu again, but for how long? All but one of the species is now regarded as at risk or threatened with extinction. Reporter Digby Werthmuller catches up with whitebaiters at Rakaia huts to discuss the future of the favourite Kiwi pastime.
Hopes are high there'll be whitebait fritters for tea. Graham Patterson's been fishing for 50 years. He knows whitebait's under threat, but says sustainability rather than catch limits is the key.
There's no good blaming the whitebaiters all the time. They're not going to catch all the whitebait that ever come in here and breed. I just think what will destroy all the whitebait and destroying lots of other things is the habitats. If the habitat gets taken away and they can't breed in their areas, well, you won't get whitebait. You know, they don't breed at sea.
The government's considering measures including safe havens for whitebait to spawn, phasing out whitebait exports and large nets, as well as a shorter season. Graham says his fishing comes to a natural end.
We get sick of it. Now, you're getting into November and we've caught enough whitebait anyway, so we're more into trout fishing and salmon fishing by then.
Well, I suppose I've fished for 30, 40 years, and the last 7 or 8, 9 years have been the best years I've ever had.
And I think, you know, the way that we fish here, the whitebait have got plenty of chance.
We don't want it to get too over-regulated because, as you see, we do a lot of hard work here just to get what we get.
Well, as you can see behind me, whitebait season is well underway, and according to a DOC survey last year of 3,000 people, 90% think that there should be more sustainable fisheries, while 77% think that there should be a catch limit.
Whitebait come in from the sea at this time of year, around springtime, and then they spend their time growing into an adult in the freshwater part of the rivers.
Like anything, a proper place to grow matters.
And what the really important thing to focus on is having that critical habitat for the eggs.
As tasty as fritters are, finding the balance is vital to keeping them on the menu for future generations. Digby Werthmuller, Metro News.
And we'll hear more about the problems facing the whitebait fishery later in the program when biologist Michael Hickford joins us in the studio. Some Banks Peninsula residents think they are being unfairly denied access to high-quality internet because fibre isn't available to them. Reporter Ursula Keay has more on the story. Ursula.
About 70,000 people live on Banks Peninsula. Some are pretty isolated, and a number are unhappy they don't get the internet or their connections are really slow. What they want is fibre, but that's not an easy solution. Internet access is a hot topic on Banks Peninsula. Dave Edwards installs wireless systems and knows more than most the best ways to connect.
But a lot of it is just miscommunication and not knowing. You know, some people want fibre, they think they need fibre 100% down to the houses to compete in the world, and they don't. They can use our wireless broadband and quite fast speeds.
But it doesn't take long to track down people with grumbles about the government's high-speed broadband rollout. Charteris Bay resident Keay Gilmore's struggling along with low-quality broadband and its data caps.
They are rolling fibre out through Diamond Harbour, which is about 4 kilometres from us, and they're rolling it out to a certain point, which is Black Rock Point. It's not like there's 3 kilometres of paddocks or bare land they have to get through before they hook up. There are continual houses from that point.
Another Charteris Bay resident echoes Craig's concerns.
They need to be able to get onto the internet, and this is modern day living. We all need to work, play, enjoy what we do on the internet.
Banks Peninsula Community Board sent a letter to the Minister of Communications, Chris Farfoy, saying that the broadband situation was unacceptable. Mr Farfoy sent a reply saying that fibre was not cost effective due to such a sparsely populated terrain. But by 2023, 98% of people will have broadband thanks to the Rural Broadband Initiative. Ultimate Broadband is responsible for the Banks Peninsula rollout. Its chief, Mike Smith, says the area's a challenge.
Realistically, it's too expensive to put in the ground. It's great in urban density, so if you're in town, you're in a small village that has a lot of homes in a small amount of space, it's relatively cheap to put in, but once you start getting into rural properties where it's a couple of kilometres per address, it's just too expensive.
Although fibre will never be an option, the government has assured residents that by 2023 they will have a better connection to the outside world. But there's some good news. The government's installing 5 new cell towers across Banks Peninsula. The first site will be in Little River in about 6 months' time. After that, O'Kane's Bay and Le Bon's Bay will be next. Once completed, an extra 650 rural homes and businesses will have the opportunity to connect.
Thanks, Ursula. Coming up, the Free Fruit in Schools initiative is helping kids eat healthy, and we catch up with the Canterbury women's rugby team.
My name is Ella Cook. I'm a television production manager in London. I work for a company called Red House Television. I work on property shows, comedy and entertainment. I worked as the production assistant on New Zealand's Got Talent on Target, on What Now. I came to London nearly 4 years ago now. Didn't have any issues finding a job at all. I went to a company called Hat-Trick Productions. We won a BAFTA last year, as well as were nominated this year. To even be nominated and go to the awards was something I never ever thought that I would ever do. But then to also win it and go up on the BAFTA stage was just a brilliant feeling. I love living in London. Definitely a big change from living in New Zealand. There's so many people, it's so busy and bustling all the time. I also love being able to just go to the theatre or see something different every night. The professionalism that we are taught at broadcasting school really helps in the wider world. I had my degree on my CV as well as the work experience that I'd gained after my internship. I would never have thought that I'd get this far. It's the best thing that I ever did for my career. There's no way that I would be where I am today without the degree that I have.
Kia ora anō. Wahine Futu Paoro, or Women's Rugby, is underway with the third week of Wharapama Cup games starting this weekend. Tia McDougall has been following Canterbury as they get ready for their first home game. Tia.
There's been lots of long hours, training in the wet and cold weather, but that's all paid off as the girls had a good win in their first game last weekend, beating the Manawatu Cyclones 36-10, a great start to what could be Canterbury's record-breaking season.
They're on a mission, chasing a fourth consecutive title.
I'm extremely excited. I talked to someone the other day, it's like a kid on Christmas Day. That's how I felt going into our first game. And the ability to unleash some new talent out of our club rugby is super exciting.
The defending champions have a new lineup, including several debutants. Among the losses from last year's team, former captain Steph Te Ohaere Fox, who has gone to have a baby. Personnel changes aren't the only challenges the girls are facing this season.
Yeah, I think there's lots of precautions, but we're really lucky. We're lucky to be able to train. I know up north they weren't able to start training for a lot longer than us, so we got to start early and we kind of made it work. We connected online and did what we could.
The Farah Palmer Cup is now underway following a 2-week delay because of Auckland's extra lockdown.
Embrace that opportunity. That was an extra, 4 trainings to get us better prepared for our first game.
New Zealand Rugby wants to make the games as accessible as possible by lowering the price tickets, the cheapest at just $8.
It's very important, and especially since the World Cup is going to be in New Zealand next year. A home World Cup is super special to have it on home ground, so I think the more people we can get interested in the women's game this year, it will just flow into next year, and the more spectators we can have.
The 13 women's teams are split into 2 pools, North and South zones. The top 2 from each will battle it out in semi-finals for their chance to make the final in late October. A game that Canterbury is desperate to feature in again.
If the Wahine do win the premiership, it'll be the first time the team has done this 4 years in a row. They at least expect to make the semi-finals here in Christchurch a few weeks from now. But first they must beat Otago this weekend, a team they are neck and neck with on the leaderboard.
Thanks, Tia. A New Zealand initiative called Fruit and Veggies in Schools is being used as an example globally. For 15 years, Kiwi kids in low decile schools have received the produce, and as I found out, it always goes down a treat. A healthy start for tamariki across Aotearoa at Decile 1 and 2 primary schools, delivered by 5+ a Day and United Fresh. The government-funded initiative has now been recognised by the World Health Organisation for its ingenuity. Te Kaumanawa Rowley School is one of the Christchurch-based kura who have been supplied the fruit for 10 years.
Children actually really enjoy the fruit. One of the favourites in the last couple of weeks is we've had carrots coming in, and the kids have really enjoyed munching on them. We encourage the children to eat it through class time, so if they're reading and they just need a snack, it's to eat the fruit.
The teachers have noticed behavioural changes and an eagerness to learn by giving the kids fruit every day. And it sure is yummy, isn't it, kids?
Yes! And I got an apple. It's healthy and it tastes yum and they taste sweet and juicy.
Through the kids eating through class, it's keeping them engaged and engaged in their learning. They know that they can just go and eat if they're feeling a bit hungry.
The tamariki always look forward to collecting the whārutu in bins with their teacher every morning.
They're more settled after we eat it, so if they don't have it in that morning block, then they get really restless.
The hope from the scheme is to widen tamariki's knowledge about healthy options for food, then pass those skills on through the generations.
It's just really good for encouraging them to eat healthy and talk about what healthy food is and what we can do outside of school in our community to make good choices around food.
The fruit and vegetable suppliers want to expand the scheme to a wider range of schools and are now in talks with the government to do just that. Emma Olsen, Metro News. 4 out of 5 whitebait species are now regarded as either at risk or threatened with extinction. Research biologist from University of Canterbury, Michael Hickford, joins reporter Digby Werthmuller in the studio today to discuss the issue. Digby.
Tēnā koe, Michael. Thanks for joining me in the studio today. Now, I've been speaking with a few whitebait and they say that they're not the problem, it's habitat loss. Why is that?
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of a mix. So, we don't know what the problem is. We know that there's a whole lot of components to it, one of which is whitebaiting itself. Obviously, the whitebaiters do remove some whitebait in the process, but we know that also habitat plays a pretty big role in this, and the loss of some of these critical habitats at critical times of the year is really important, but we don't know the relative importance is the sort of the key problem.
And what should we be doing to prevent whitebait from going extinct?
I think there's a bit of moderation in all things. So, moderation in the fishery, and I think there's a general acknowledgement that the whitebaiters themselves acknowledge that they don't need to catch everything right throughout the season, but also moderation in terms of what we're doing with their habitats. We're aware of some of the things that really have an impact on these species and the way that they can get through and get to a stage where they can lay their eggs and spawn. But if we impact too many areas too much, then we have a problem.
Talking about moderation, I know that paua, there's a catch limit for paua, 10 per person. Why can't there be a catch limit for whitebait?
Yeah, it's a challenge. The problem is that, the whitebait fishery is very widely spread, so there are a lot of people fishing in some fairly remote areas in New Zealand, and the paua fishery is very well known, very well resourced in terms of compliance officers out there policing the fishery and watching, and a lot of people watching over the people that are fishing shoulder to make sure that they're doing the right thing. But whitebaiting's different. Whitebaiting is in a fairly closed river, away from the public eye, and you can get away with murder if you want to. So that's the problem, is actually getting the compliance to look after the fishery.
Do you think the Department of Conservation are doing enough to help?
Yeah, the department's torn. So they're charged both with managing a fishery and making sure that it's sustainable, but also the conservation of the species. So at this stage, they do a very good job of working towards the conservation of the species, but managing the fishery is tough because we just don't know what's going on. We don't have enough data about the status of the fishery, what's being caught, where it's being caught, when it's being caught. And without those sort of basic data, it's really hard to manage a fishery.
Do you think the current season of 15 weeks is too long?
Probably is. There's an acknowledgement, I think, from most people around New Zealand that November's are not a great month for fishing, and most people by that stage have either had enough or the fish have stopped coming and they're getting tired and don't want to keep going. So I think there's an acceptance that maybe losing part of November would be a good idea, and an acceptance that maybe some of the early part of the season is also not always a very good time to be fishing. So yeah, possibly a shortening, but maybe not applying that throughout New Zealand.
And experts say that all 5 whitebait species could be extinct by 2034. Is that an accurate prediction?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So those experts have a model. They don't know any better than what the model tells them. So the model suggests, at the current rates of decline, that may be a true scenario. There are other people who are just as expert who have different models that say that, the decline's nowhere near as rapid and that we'll probably still have very healthy populations another 60, 70, 80 years away. So yeah, the problem is that we, again, with a lack of knowledge, we're guessing to a certain extent. So these models are only as good as the data we're putting into them, and we don't have many data. That's the problem.
Ngā mihi, Michael. Thank you very much for coming in today.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Digby. Coming up, we meet a local who's turning plastic waste into jewellery, and we check out how Kiwi's favourite kids show is coping with COVID.
My name's Chris Nichol and I'm head of production for Capital FM Network, doing TV, I'm doing online, I'm doing event audio, and I'm working with a team of 8 people. We make everything, every single sweeper, ident, thing that says what radio station you're listening to, what TV station you're watching. Broadcasting school put me in a scenario where I had to figure things out, hands-on learning, getting stuck in, teaching yourself stuff. It also prepared me for the sorts of people that you come in contact with in media and how to deal with situations, especially high stressful situations. The great thing was the tutors were really encouraging and really helpful. They were like senior members of staff in a real radio station. Nowhere else will you get hands-on learning that actually lands you in a real radio station doing real work as part of the course. I have freelanced at some fantastic places and made some really good friends just from being able to turn up and be nice and polite and professional. All of those things is what broadcasting school was really good at versing you in. Being in London, it's a melting pot of creativity and ideas and people. I'm doing stations in Iceland, Germany, America, New Zealand still, which is wonderful. I can't say I expected it to be quite like this, but it's awesome.
Welcome back. Imagine taking something no one wants and turning it into a profitable enterprise. Well, that's what one Christchurch woman has done, and her work has been recognised at the highest level. Antoinette Spicer has more.
Anthea McDougall knows all about turning trash into treasure.
I take the 3D printer waste from Tūranga Library, and so I take all of the rubbish that they collect and then I get it shredded up and then I lay it out into sheets.
For the last 2.5 years, she's been recycling plastic products, making them into jewellery and other items with a sustainable story.
So I make lots of different bits and pieces, and each of the products I try and use in a way to communicate a different problem.
But it's her earrings that have hit the headlines.
So my daughter and I sent Jacinda a parcel after lockdown to thank her for being an amazing woman and looking after us all, and the parcel included a pair of earrings.
At the end of May, the PM wore them at a news conference, and next thing, it was all over social media.
And it just went mental. And so then I was on the news and in the paper and had orders and have been just making earrings ever since.
She had to get her friends in to help, and 3,500 pairs later, she's finally caught up with demand.
The opportunity that this has given me is to continue what I'm doing and communicate it to more people.
She chose the Hoya feather design to highlight the consequences of unsustainable practices.
So the Hoya feathers were worn as an adornment by Māori and Europeans because they're stunning, and then they went extinct in 1905.
The goal is to start a conversation about recycling single-use plastics.
I'm going to design products for each of the colours because at the moment I'm only using black and white and there's lots of other colours.
Right now she's focused on jewellery, but in the future she'd like to refashion other plastics as well. Antoinette Spicer, Metro News.
Christchurch hospitality businesses are welcoming news that COVID restrictions are likely to be eased for much of the country early next week. But many have struggled this year. Mitch Redmond speaks to one nightclub owner who reinvented his business to survive.
From pulsating beats to sizzling meat. It's been a while since Christchurch has witnessed scenes like this. Hyde nightclub before COVID. On the weekend, hundreds of drum and bass, house and techno-loving music fans queue up outside the St Asaph Street doors. With COVID-19 putting a halt to mass gatherings, Hyde nightclub owner Mitch Ryder had to rethink business. To get some money flowing in, he repurposed the nightclub and turned it into a burger joint.
COVID forced our hand, and we'd always wanted to do either pizza or fried chicken or LA style burgers.
Black Burger specialises in premium cheeseburgers using Wagyu beef and other ingredients sourced locally here in Canterbury. Initially they opened as a ghost restaurant, only taking orders via Uber Eats. Now people can also dine in. Trading's still tough in spite of the reinvention.
With COVID right now, we are, like many hospitality businesses, always on the brink.
Last month, the Restaurant Association released survey figures on how their members have been affected by the recent Level 2 restrictions. Nearly half of all bars and restaurants said they were turning over significantly less money compared to the same time last year. With Level 1 likely to return here next week, things are looking up for Mitch. He'll be able to get Hyde nightclub back in action, but now he's also been bitten by the burger bug.
Yeah, Black Burger's been fantastic. We're stoked with it. We just want to keep pushing it.
It'll be a busy week at Hyde, with bangers and a burger on the side. Mitch Redmond, Metro News.
New Zealand's favourite children's program, What Now?, has also had to adapt to COVID-19. As I found out, the cast and crew of the children's show have taken it in their stride. A show that has been around for 39 years, one that many Kiwis under the age of 50 would have memories of, is still going as strong as ever.
I think it's still on screen because it's still relevant to kids and families today, with the kind of content that we have, which is very much taking a light-hearted look at life, but also showcasing the skills and talents of young people and giving kids a voice.
When COVID-19 took the world by storm, the team didn't have a lot of time to prepare. The crew at What Now have had to take many health and safety precautions in order to keep the show running. This includes using a social distancing microphone, keeping a 1 metre space between everyone, and wearing a mask.
We're usually an on-the-road show, so that was where it was disruptive, especially the first lockdown where we literally did the shows from our homes. So we weren't live when we were in lockdown. We pre-recorded the shows earlier in the week, and our wonderful editor Tyler put it all together and made it a 2-hour show, which was actually really impressive.
Sleeping in on a Sunday was the biggest perk. However, it meant they couldn't get out to schools and communities across Aotearoa.
being so adaptive, I think, to everything that's been going on has been really cool. Although it has been a bit of a bummer not being able to, hang out with the kids and the audience. Still being able to put that show out for everyone at home to view, especially in such a crazy time, I think has been a real tribute to how good the team's been.
Yeah. 3.
Next year will be What Now's 40th birthday, and they have big plans in store.
We're looking to have a birthday special, less for children and more for their parents and whānau that remember What Now from when it first started.
Whether the show will be around for another 40 years, who knows? But for now, it'll be a sweet spot for Kiwi kids.
Just the wrong word.
Emma Olsen, Metro News. And now to the weather. It was a beautiful day in Ototahi, with clear skies in the Ata and a bit of high cloud making an appearance this ahi. Looking ahead, the overnight low will be a balmy Te Ko Tākiri, and tomorrow will once again be ka pai, reaching all the way to Te Rua Te Ko Tākiri.
That's all for Metro News tonight.
For those stories and more, head to our website metronews.co.nz, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram.
Join us again tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Ko Nick James aho.
Ko Emma Olsen aho.
Ka kite anō.